On a quiet block in Fayetteville, a childhood home became the reason J. Cole rewrote his destiny. The headlines called it a comeback. Rapper returns, buys back the house his family lost to foreclosure. But what they missed is this. Behind the platinum albums was a boy watching his mother's dreams slip away, driving him to prove that there's beauty in the struggle. Years later, he paid $121,000, not for luxury, but to open those same doors to single mothers with nowhere else to go. How does losing everything turn into lifting a community, and what does it mean to buy back more than just a house? This is the rapper who bought back his block, the J. Cole story. Morning in Fayetteville settles softly, sunlight filtering through tall pines and quiet streets lined with modest homes. On Forest Hills Drive, the day begins with the sound of a mother moving through the kitchen, the gentle clatter of dishes, and the aroma of coffee drifting into the hallway. For young Jermaine and his older brother, these moments shaped the rhythm of home, a place where warmth and care lingered, even when times were lean. Neighbors remember the Cole house for its stillness, the laughter of two boys drifting out to the front yard, and the steady presence of their mother, Kay. She worked long hours at the post office, sometimes coming home with tired eyes, but always making sure her sons had what they needed, even if it meant going without herself. The block itself felt safe, almost tucked away from the world's troubles. Children played on the grass, bicycles leaned against mailbox posts, and the air was filled with the sound of cicadas in the summer. Inside, the kitchen table became the center of gravity, where homework was spread out, bills were counted, and dreams were spoken quietly between bites of dinner. Kay's voice, gentle but firm, guided the household through stretches of uncertainty and hope. She taught her boys to value what they had, to look out for each other, and to keep moving forward no matter how hard life pressed in. James Hall, a neighbor from up the street, often saw Jermaine walking home after school, violin case in hand, head down but always quick to nod hello. Even then, there was a sense that something important was growing inside that house, a quiet ambition, a belief that better days were possible. The walls of 2014 Forest Hills Drive held onto every small victory and every setback, turning ordinary afternoons into memories that would last a lifetime. On this block, home was more than shelter. It was the beginning of everything. At Terry Sanford High School, Jermaine Cole stood out for reasons that had nothing to do with fame. In the classroom, he kept his head down, always focused, always prepared. Teachers remember a quiet determination, a student who turned in every assignment, who seemed to chase not just good grades, but something deeper. By graduation, his report card told its own story, a 4.2 GPA, the kind that opened doors even when money was tight at home. But school was only part of the picture. Music was the other. Afternoons often meant lugging a violin case through the halls, then practicing scales in the living room while his brother watched TV nearby. Cole joined the orchestra not because it was cool, but because he wanted to learn. He'd sit in the back row, bow in hand, listening for the right note, repeating the same phrase until it felt right. That same stubbornness showed up when he started making beats. First on an old computer, then with friends from Bomb Shelter, a local crew that met after school to trade rhymes and swap ideas. Their sessions were simple, a handful of kids, a cracked version of Fruity Loops, and a dream that felt just out of reach. The house on Forest Hills Drive became their unofficial studio. Cole's mother would let them stay up late as long as the noise didn't wake the neighbors. There, between homework and dinner, the first mixtapes took shape. Sometimes the only audience was his brother and a few close friends. But even then, the energy in the room was different, focused, hopeful, and hungry. Humility was part of the air in that house, but so was ambition. Cole believed that if he worked hard enough, if he kept his circle tight and his vision clear, he could turn struggle into something beautiful. There's beauty in the struggle, he would say, long before the world listened. News travels differently when you're far from home. For Jermaine Cole, the call came while he was hundreds of miles away, busy with classes and music in New York. On the other end, his mother's voice was strained, holding back the weight of something she couldn't shield him from. The house on Forest Hills Drive, the one that had been their anchor after years of moving, was gone. foreclosure. There was no time to say goodbye to the kitchen where he practiced violin or the room where he made his first beats. The place that once felt like a fortress now belonged to someone else. In that moment, distance became more than geography. Cole felt it in his chest, a cold, empty space where certainty used to live. He thought of his mother, who had worked late shifts and juggled bills to keep that roof over their heads. Now even her voice sounded smaller, as if the loss had shrunk the world around her. For a son who had always wanted to protect her, there was nothing to do but listen as the silence stretched between them. The news didn't just sting, it rewrote everything. At college, surrounded by classmates who would never know what that address meant, Cole drifted through days in a fog. He replayed memories of childhood in Fayetteville, the laughter and late-night talks, the sense of safety that had always felt fragile. Shame crept in, quiet but sharp, reminding him of the promises he'd made to himself about making it, about never letting his family slip backward. He poured the ache into notebooks and headphones, channeling anger and confusion into music. Friends noticed he was quieter, more driven, staying up late to chase something he couldn't quite name. The foreclosure didn't just take a house, it took a piece of his foundation, leaving him both untethered and determined. In the emptiness, a new resolve started to take root. Someday he would find a way to come back, not just for himself, but for the people who had lost more than walls and windows. "There's beauty in the struggle," he wrote, clinging to the hope that one day loss could be transformed into something lasting. Late nights in cramped dorm rooms became routine. Jermaine hunched over his laptop, headphones on, piecing together beats while the city outside faded into a blur. Friends from Bombshell 2 remember those evenings, Cole barely speaking, just nodding as he looped the same drum pattern, searching for a way to make the ache in his chest sound like hope. The foreclosure had stripped away more than a roof. It left him with a question that circled every verse. How do you turn loss into something that lasts? Studio sessions stretched into the early morning. Cole's notebooks filled with lyrics about home, about leaving and returning, about the gap between what you dream and what you can hold. Peers recall him scribbling lines between classes, muttering hooks under his breath, refusing to let bitterness settle. He started setting quiet goals, the kind you don't say out loud. One day he would buy back that house, not for status, but to prove that pain could be rewritten. To show his mother that struggle wasn't the end of the story. Those closest to him saw the change. He worked longer, listened harder, and kept his circle small. Every setback became a reason to push further. The hunger to succeed wasn't just about music anymore, it was about redemption, about giving his family the comfort they'd lost. Early collaborators noticed the shift. Sessions grew more intense, each verse sharper, each beat carrying the weight of a promise. The mission was personal, but it didn't stay private for long. Cole's drive started to pull others in, shaping a community around the idea that art could heal, that ambition could be a way back home. He began to see his story as more than survival. It was a blueprint for turning wounds into wisdom, for making sure the next chapter was written on his own terms. Love yours, he would write, a reminder that even in loss, there was something worth holding on to. The fire that burned after foreclosure became the engine behind every song, every late-night grind, a quiet strength building towards something that felt like purpose. Mixtapes became Jermaine's lifeline. In New York, he worked days at part-time jobs and spent nights hunched over borrowed equipment, recording tracks that traveled from campus parties to internet forums. The first project, The Come Up, landed quietly in 2007, but it was the warm-up in 2009 that began to change everything. Word spread about a young rapper who mixed hunger with honesty, weaving stories of Fayetteville into beats that sounded both classic and new. Fans started quoting his lines online, and the music reached far beyond the dorm rooms where it started. Industry veterans took notice. Mark Pitts, a respected manager, heard the mixtape and called Cole into his Manhattan office, offering advice and opening doors. But the biggest break came when Cole waited outside Rock the Mic Studios, hoping for a chance to hand his CD to Jay-Z. Hours passed. Cole stood in the rain, clutching his demo. When Jay-Z finally emerged, Cole stepped forward. The encounter was brief. A few words, a CD passed from one hand to another, but it was enough. Months later, Cole became the first artist signed to Roc Nation, a new label led by Jay-Z himself. Cole's reputation grew with each release. Friday Night Lights in 2010 drew praise from critics and fans alike, solidifying his place as one of the most promising voices in hip-hop. The mixtape wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a catalog of ambition, loss, and hope. Tracks like Too Deep for the Intro and Farewell hinted at the pain of losing home, while others celebrated the grind. Cole's ability to blend vulnerability with skill set him apart from the crowd. He wasn't chasing trends, he was building something of his own. Mentors came and went, but the lessons stuck. Jay-Z pushed him to sharpen his craft, to avoid shortcuts, and to trust his own voice. Studio sessions became classrooms, each beat refined until it matched the story he wanted to tell. Cole learned to navigate the pressures of the industry without losing the humility that Fayetteville had given him. Every win felt earned, not given. By the time the label offered him a shot at a full-length album, Cole was ready. The journey from late-night sessions and lost addresses to studio deals and co-signs proved one thing. He had the credibility to reclaim what he'd lost. The mixtape era was over, but the foundation was set. The next chapter would be about more than music. It would be about coming home. When the album dropped in December 2014, the address on the cover, 2010 Forest Hills Drive, became more than a point on a map. The numbers echoed across social media, painted on murals, and scribbled in notebooks by fans who saw their own stories in Cole's. The record moved 371,000 copies in its first week, a figure that stunned industry insiders and sent a quiet Fayetteville street into the spotlight. The house that once sheltered a quiet boy and his mother now stood at the center of a cultural wave, transformed by the music that grew up inside its walls. For many, the address turned into a destination. Fans traveled from across the country, standing on the curb to snap photos or just to look, hoping to feel something of what Cole described in his lyrics. Some left handwritten notes at the mailbox, thanking him for giving voice to struggle and hope. Others traced the path from the sidewalk to the front steps, imagining the boy who once dreamed in those rooms. The street sign itself became a collector's target, with more than one attempt to pry it loose for a piece of the myth. The album's impact stretched beyond charts and sales. For Fayetteville's youth, the address became a symbol of possibility, a reminder that greatness could rise from quiet places. Neighborhood kids started posing for their own album covers on the front stoop, echoing the now iconic image. Local businesses noticed the uptick in visitors, and neighbors found themselves fielding questions from strangers about the house, the block, and the boy who made it out. The meaning of 2010 Forest Hills Drive shifted. It was no longer just a family's lost home or even just a rapper's origin story. It became a pilgrimage site, a place where pain and pride met in the open. The album's honesty reframed the house as a monument to resilience, turning private memory into shared inspiration. As the world pressed for more, interviews, appearances, explanations, Cole kept his focus steady. The address wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about what could be reclaimed and what could be given back. On a quiet morning in June 2010, a property transfer was recorded in Fayetteville. The house at 2014 Forest Hills Drive changed hands for $121,000. Its new owner listed not as Jermaine Cole, but as the Dreamville Foundation. There was no fanfare, no press release, no hint in the local papers that the address now belonged to the boy who once called it home. The paperwork was handled with deliberate care, an LLC standing between Cole and the public eye, shielding the transaction from curious neighbors and eager fans. The real estate agent involved never spoke to the press, and the closing came and went like any other on the county books. Only a handful of people knew the truth behind the buyer's name. For Cole, privacy mattered more than celebration. The purchase wasn't about reclaiming a trophy or making a statement. It was about restoring something quietly, on his own terms, without the weight of headlines or expectations. Even after the sale, there were no photos, no interviews, just the slow work of turning memory into something practical. After the deal closed, a new security fence appeared around the property. The old mailbox stayed, but the house itself grew quieter, its windows shaded from the sudden attention brought by the album release. Fans started to visit, drawn by the music and the myth, but the home remained closed to the public, its purpose still a secret. Cole's decision to use his foundation rather than his own name reflected a deeper intent. He wanted the house to stand for something beyond nostalgia or fame. The mechanics of the purchase, LLC filings, silent negotiations, anonymous signatures, were all part of keeping the focus on the work to come, not on himself. In a world where every move is broadcast, Cole chose discretion, letting actions speak where words would have only drawn noise. The house was his again, but this time its story would unfold quietly behind closed doors. The doors at 2014 Forest Hills Drive opened quietly, without cameras or fanfare. The first families arrived with little more than hope and a few boxes, stepping into rooms once filled with childhood dreams and late-night music. Each mother brought her own story, some escaping uncertainty, others searching for a safe place to begin again. The house, now under the Dreamville Foundation, offered something rare in Fayetteville: 2 years of rent-free living, a chance to catch their breath and plan for what came next. Inside, the walls held onto old memories, but new ones took shape as children's laughter echoed through the halls. Mornings started with the sound of cereal poured into bowls, backpacks zipped, and shoes tied at the door. The kitchen table became a gathering place again, this time for mothers and their children, sharing meals and making plans for the future. Neighbors noticed the difference: lights on late, curtains drawn with care, the steady rhythm of life returning to a home that once stood empty. The program's design was simple but powerful. Each family could stay for up to 2 years, rent-free, with the goal of finding stability and moving forward on their own terms. There were no headlines, no public lists of names, just quiet respect for privacy and dignity. For the women who lived there, the house was more than a shelter. It was a second chance, a place where wounds could begin to heal. One mother told a local pastor that for the first time in years, she could sleep through the night knowing her children were safe. J. Cole spoke about the decision with characteristic humility. "What better way to give back than to help people going through what my mom went through," he said. The gesture was never about charity for the cameras. It was about creating the kind of refuge his own family once needed, a space where struggle could give way to hope. As the first families settled in, the house at Forest Hills Drive became a haven, its story rewritten not with headlines, but with everyday acts of care. When the front door closed each evening, it closed on a promise kept, that success means lifting others, not just yourself. Praise came quickly from many corners of Fayetteville. Neighbors spoke with pride about the boy from up the street who returned, not with headlines or luxury cars, but with a house key and a plan to help single mothers. Local officials called the gesture rare, even remarkable, in a city where good news often travels quietly. For families nearby, the transformation of 2014 Forest Hills Drive into a haven for women and children felt like a victory shared by the whole block. Some residents started calling it the Dreamville House, a point of pride they mentioned to out-of-town relatives or curious fans who stopped to take photos. But not every reaction was simple. With the album's success, the neighborhood saw more cars parked along the curb and strangers wandering up to the mailbox, searching for a piece of the story. Some longtime residents worried about the sudden attention. The quiet street, once known mostly for its stillness, found itself on hip-hop pilgrimage maps and social media feeds. Local kids posed for photos on the front steps, while others left notes and flowers at the door, hoping their gratitude would reach the man who made the music that brought them there. The increased traffic brought small headaches. Delivery trucks lingered longer, and at least once a neighbor called the city to complain about the crowds. One weekend, someone spray-painted a message on the side of the house. "J. Cole, do you even care about the veal?" The graffiti was gone by Monday, scrubbed off before most people noticed, but the question lingered in conversation. Some wondered if the project was more about image than impact, or if the gesture would last beyond the news cycle. Others pointed out that the house was closed to the public with a new security fence and drawn curtains, making it hard for outsiders to see the real work happening inside. Still, the mood on Forest Hills Drive remained mostly hopeful. For every skeptic, there were two who defended Cole's choice to keep the project quiet, arguing that real change didn't need applause. A few residents organized informal watch groups, keeping an eye out for vandals and helping guide visitors who got lost looking for the famous address. Local pastors and community leaders used the story as an example in Sunday sermons, reminding their congregations that giving back can take many forms, and that sometimes the most meaningful acts happen away from the spotlight. Debate about the house rippled through Fayetteville's barbershops, church halls, and online message boards. Some compared Cole's effort to other celebrity projects, noting that his focus on transitional housing rather than business investment or tourism set him apart. The conversation stretched beyond the block, touching on themes of legacy, responsibility, and what it means to come home. Through it all, the house at 2014 Forest Hills Drive stood as both a symbol and a question. What does it mean to give back, and who gets to decide if it's enough? The Dreamville Foundation began in 2011, tucked away in a small Fayetteville office, with a handful of staff and a simple mission: to help young people see themselves as more than their circumstances. Early on, the foundation organized back-to-school drives, stacks of notebooks and backpacks lined up in church basements, volunteers greeting families by name. Mentorship programs paired high school students with local college graduates, creating a quiet pipeline of encouragement that stretched far beyond a single summer. In those rooms, kids who had never met a professional writer or engineer sat across from Dreamville volunteers, talking about what it would take to get into college, or what it meant to keep going when life got hard. Each year, the foundation hosted the Nobody's Perfect Writing Contest, inviting Fayetteville students to share their stories for a chance at scholarships and public recognition. For many, it was the first time anyone had asked them to put their dreams on paper. The winners stood on stage at Dreamville Weekend, holding certificates, their families crowded into folding chairs. One mother, wiping tears from her eyes, told a reporter, "He just needed someone to believe in him." The foundation's reach kept growing. Dreamville Weekend became a fixture in the city, drawing hundreds of kids to workshops in music, art, and entrepreneurship. Local teachers noticed changes. Students who once drifted through the year now showed up early for class, eager to talk about their goals. Dreamville staff, many of them Fayetteville natives, built relationships that lasted long after the events ended. They kept in touch with scholarship recipients, checking in on grades and job applications, sometimes helping with rent or textbooks when money ran short. For the youth who passed through Dreamville's programs, the message was always the same: your story matters, and your struggle is not the end. One former mentee, now a college graduate, credits the foundation with helping her see beyond the limits of her neighborhood. "They showed me that I could come back and give something too. The work was never loud, but its effects rippled outward. Neighborhoods that once felt overlooked found new energy in the foundation's presence. Parents started volunteering for events, local businesses donated supplies, and city leaders began to talk about Dreamville as a model for how music and community could work together." Cole's own words, "Love yours," became a motto for the staff, a reminder that the smallest acts of care could build something lasting. By the end of the decade, Dreamville's catalog of programs included everything from literacy initiatives to job fairs, each one shaped by the belief that real change means investing in people, not just places. In Fayetteville, the foundation's quiet persistence offered proof that generosity, once institutionalized, could outlast any single act. For every scholarship awarded and every young person mentored, the foundation planted seeds that would grow long after the headlines faded. In June 2010, official records confirmed J. Cole, through his Dreamville Foundation, LLC, quietly bought back his childhood home at 2014 Forest Hills Drive for $121,000. The house where he once studied violin and earned a 4.2 GPA became a sanctuary for single mothers, offering 2-year rent-free stays, turning personal pain into community hope. Yet some details remain private. The names of resident families are protected, and the full long-term impact of the program is still unfolding. What is certain is this: since founding the Dreamville Foundation in 2011, Cole's efforts have expanded far beyond one address, providing scholarships and mentorship to Fayetteville youth. As facts show, his journey from eviction to empowerment was never about luxury, but legacy. In his own words, there's beauty in the struggle. He didn't just buy a house, he bought back hope. The marathon continues.